Uh-oh, Marco did an oopsie! A little while ago, I made a video talking about our wonderful and level-headed For Honor community, and if you haven't watched it yet, I really think that you should. I actually got a lot of positive feedback about it, which made me a happy boy. I also got a lot of negative feedback about one particular comment, which didn't make me a happy boy. I basically insinuated that PC players getting 60 frames a second versus consoles being locked at 30 frames a second was not why heroes like Orochi felt faster. Speaking of Orochi, this video is sponsored by Project Orochi, who is celebrating the launch of Season 3 of their clothing line. In addition to their classics, there's new designs like Fire and Blood, inspired by Game of Thrones, a Wulin long sleeve, and much, much more. My absolute favorite though has to be the Kensei tee. I mean, come on, you can't tell me that you wouldn't feel like a powerful samurai warrior wearing that. You can check out Project Orochi via the link in the description, and make sure you use the code HEAVYONRED for a 10% discount. Once again, big thank you to Project Orochi for sponsoring this video. Now let's get into discussing why console players find fast heroes like Orochi a problem. So here's what I said in the last video. Or even general facts like 60 frames per second not being as much of an advantage as a majority of console players think. And here's what everyone heard me say in the last video. For Honor on console doesn't need 60 frames per second, and the console players are a bunch of moronic crybabies. Now admittedly, I didn't flesh out my point properly, and I did follow up my comments with this.
Everything's so clear! I can see!
I can fight!
It's a meme and nothing beyond that. But with the release of Sunny D, the newest Wulin hero who boasts 400 millisecond dodge attacks and unblockable light finishers, I thought that the 30 versus 60 FPS debate would be a hot topic for a video. Get it? Because his feet deal with fire, and fire is hot. I will fully admit here that yes, playing For Honor feels very different on consoles than it does on a PC, or even my gaming laptop, because everyone keeps feeling the need to remind me that it is not a PC. Being locked at 30 FPS as opposed to playing on 60 FPS, even if the difference is, in my opinion, minimal, is affecting console players and their ability to react. Yay, we got Marco to admit he's an idiot and we were right. Haha, 30 FPS sucks. We need 60 or else separate balancing. Woo! Wait a minute, I wasn't finished. The meme that I was referring to in my previous video is how many console players want separate balancing solely because of the FPS difference, as in their eyes, this alone is what separates the two communities, why the game feels different, and how people can react better on PC. Now using this logic, many players on PC have setups that let them play well beyond 60 frames per second, giving them an even further advantage. So does this mean that we need to further split the smaller PC player base and have matchmaking locked to 60 FPS gang in one group and unlocked in the other? Obviously not, that's stupid. Let's do a quick breakdown of frames per second and what exactly it is, what it means, and how it affects your gaming experience. Now I don't see it as often now, but the biggest argument some players have for the advocacy of a higher frame rate on console is that 30 FPS attacks are fast.
Wrong!
Frames per second refers to literally that, the amount of frames in a second of motion picture. Remember that any video, whether it's a film or a video game, we're just looking at a bunch of pictures being shown rapidly to simulate motion. The more frames you have per second, the smoother the animation and or movement will be. Aha! This means you can see more, therefore console players are at a disadvantage! Slow your roll, kiddo. We'll get to that. Movies are, for the most part, filmed at 24 frames per second, basically because humanity has made films at that frame rate for so long that its look is so iconic and filmic, and we just know that we're watching a film when we see it. Cinematic TV shows have even started to adapt this to feel more film-like. Due to technological reasons I don't nor ever will care to understand, North American television is typically recorded and displayed at roughly 30 frames per second, or 29.97 frames per second if you really want to get technical, while Europe is at 25 frames per second, again for the same reason I think. Now I don't know if the North American frame rate influenced it, but many games on consoles nowadays play at 30 FPS, as it is smoother than 24 or 25 frames per second. But if you're wondering why more cinematic or narrative-driven games don't play at 24 frames per second to recreate that cinematic feeling, it's because pictures from a camera can capture a very natural motion blur that helps motion still feel fluid when we see it. Whereas video games would need to try to recreate motion blur to help the motion feel natural, and it just doesn't. Playing at 30 FPS then eliminates the need for motion blur to help make motion feel smoother. So why are consoles locked at 30 FPS? Well, actually they're not. There are several games such as the most recent God of War on PS4, and even several fighting or racing games that all play actually at 60 FPS on consoles. However, many games end up being locked at 30 FPS on consoles to ensure the performance is as consistent and smooth as possible without any screen tearing or frame drops. Graphics are important to gamers. Just ask all the fanboys who spend time watching graphical comparison videos and arguing about their favorite evil corporation in the comments sections. In contrast, because a PC could be a Frankenstein's monster of different parts, PC games tend to leave their graphics settings unlocked, so you can choose to run with settings that best match your system and desired performance. The revered 60 frames a second achievable on PCs is honestly on the low end for some people's setups, and it's probably just a meme because it's double the typical 30 FPS that console plebeians are stuck with. At the end of the day, however, a higher frames per second is, again, just creating smoother animation, and it doesn't affect the speed of a game, unless it's Street Fighter V on PC. In For Honor, attacks all still take the same time. There is just less animation at 30 FPS, so the attack doesn't look as smooth. Looking at the difference between footage captured from my PS4 Pro at 30 FPS and my gaming laptop locked at 60 FPS, Sunda's dodge forward light still has all the same timings, including the dodge forward, when the attack indicator shows up, and when the attack lands. It's just that my console renders half the frames that my gaming laptop can. The attack still starts and ends at the exact same frame points. The same goes for Yormi the Normie's light attack into Bash here. The attacks all start and end at the same points in time. Again, the 60 FPS footage just shows more of the attack's journey to its final destination. So what about that guy's argument earlier about seeing more? Well, you can't visually react to what you can't see, and nobody is disputing that. Just ask everyone stun tapped by a raider in the last few months. Joke aside, the problem with fighting Raider wasn't that you couldn't see properly, it's that you couldn't see his animations properly, or it was difficult to, especially on console with less frames to identify his movements. It's why I think the removal of the stun and renaming the move Storming Tap is simply slapping a band-aid on a tumor. Seeing more of an animation will better help you in your decision-making process, especially when every fraction of a second matters in fighting games. But let's look closer at Raider's soft feint to stunning tap at 30 FPS versus 60 FPS. The attack starts at the same point in time, and the indicator switches also at the same point in time, as does the time the attack hits. Again, the timing has not changed from console to PC or gaming laptop. However, I definitely see the case for why it's more difficult to accurately react to the change in animations. For all the beautiful and smooth motion capture moves in For Honor, some of Raider's animations could be janky as hell after his rework.
Wait till you see the... No.
This is a prime example of why proper animation is important in fighting games, especially one like For Honor that relies on many of its mind games coming from soft feints or fake-outs, where one animation transitions into another. If the animation isn't fluent, it makes reacting to your opponents much more difficult.
But Marco, that's the problem, is we can't react to the attacks on console!
Please, Jimbo, take a breather. I'm about to address that. Attack timings in many traditional fighting games that are capped at 60 FPS, like Street Fighter, Tekken, and Mortal Kombat, are measured by their frame data. This refers to the number of startup frames, active frames, and recovery frames the movement has. Let's take a closer look at the only J-pop artist I stan, Lucky Chloe.
Hi! Lucky Chloeだよ.
Her standing 1, or jab, has 10 startup frames, which I believe is the fastest attack any character can have in Tekken 7. In comparison, attacks in For Honor are measured in milliseconds as opposed to frames, likely because of the various frame rates achievable in the game. Some of the fastest attacks in For Honor can come out in 400 milliseconds. So if Lucky Chloe's standing 1 has 10 startup frames, it means players have roughly 166 milliseconds to react to this jab before it hits. Quick maths, if you're wondering how I got that time, there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second, and we're looking at 60 frames per second, so we do 1,000 milliseconds divided by 60 frames to get roughly 16.67 milliseconds per frame. Multiplying that by 10 frames equals roughly 166.7 milliseconds total. I need a drink after that one. 400 ms attacks in For Honor at 60 frames per second, using the same equation, gives players 24 frames to react, while console players at 30 FPS have half the frames per second, and thus half the frames, so 24 divided by 2 is 12. Again, this is all, though, in the time span of 400 milliseconds. According to HumanBenchmark.com and the data they've collected, the average human reaction time to visual stimuli is 284 milliseconds, which is slower than the time of that aforementioned 10-frame jab, and thus it can be considered an unreactable attack. With this logic, that means that 400 ms attacks in For Honor could be considered reactable. So right now you might be wondering then, how do some people block 10 frame or 166 ms jabs that come out literally faster than most humans can react? How come some people have trouble reacting to 400 ms attacks on For Honor console, which should be reactable per the earlier statistic? Are fighting game tournament winners absolute gods with reaction speed so fast they actually see into the future? Am I a human sloth? No disrespect, Papa Schmulty. Probably, but please, consider the following. If I'm playing Tekken, and I'm not the greatest player in the world, so bear with me, knowing that there's some attacks that come out faster than I can actually react to, I will need to predict when they will come out, or else I'm gonna eat jabs all match. I'm not predicting lottery numbers and waiting around for the results. I'm actively engaging with my opponent trying to guess how they will act or how they will react to my moves. You can make your predictions based on the opponent's moveset, movements, and how they've been playing all match, otherwise known as trying to read your opponent. For Honor is no different. While attacks do come out slower at a more reactable time in comparison, staying one step ahead of your opponent is a great way to ensure your victory. For example, if I'm fighting against a Warden, I know that they have a top light attack that has a crushing property, and the opponent may opt to use that over a standard parry. If I correctly predict the opponent will go for this, I'm gonna throw a top heavy, feint it, and then parry their light attack, and I've read them like a book. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Sun Tzu, Sabaton, Michael Scott. But Marco, you didn't even address the "how come some people have trouble reacting to 400 ms lights on console" comment from earlier. And that's because with many other factors at play, attack timings in For Honor are actually lying to you. There's a reason those attacks feel faster, and it is certainly not due to consoles playing at 30 frames per second, or if it is the very least of your worries. There is a reason that fast attacks in For Honor that should theoretically be reactable end up feeling or even being completely unreactable. Just ask Freeze, who did a whole video on it called Unreactable. First of all, you need to remember that there is a guard switch delay of 100 milliseconds, and all players see their opponent's offensive inputs online 66 milliseconds after the attacker inputs them as a way of compensating for latency. The For Honor developers have a whole blog post on this system and others that they have considered in the description, and it probably explains it a lot better than I just did. So that right there takes off another 66 ms, and that's not even with fighting someone with over 100 ping, leaving you with 233 milliseconds to react to a 400 millisecond delayed attack on screen. That's already below the average human reaction speed we discussed earlier, still doable by some, but definitely not by all.
But I'm not done yet!
The main cause for your reactions feeling slower on console For Honor actually comes from how long it takes for an input to be sent from the controller in your hand to your system, the system processing the information, and then it being spit out onto your display. This phenomenon that many people forget exists is otherwise known as input latency or input delay. A lot of the information I'm about to share with you comes from Freeze and XDeadZX, who have done tests to show how input latency affects For Honor. I know some may say it's a cop-out to not show all this information or test it myself, but I'm not going to echo their findings because I strongly believe that their work shouldn't go unnoticed. I don't want to take away any potential views from them, so once you're finished with this video, I strongly recommend you check out the links in the description to watch them. Trust me, it is worth it. What they found echoes a lot of what I've read online, that consoles take a lot longer to process data and spit it out to a display than a PC, and the type of display you use also hugely impacts your experience. My microphone! You could look at it this way. Because what you're seeing on your display is already delayed by, I don't know, let's say for the sake of argument, and because it's an easy number, 100 milliseconds. You're always looking 100 milliseconds into the past. So if I try to parry on console at what seems like the right moment, it's actually not. That window of opportunity passed 100 milliseconds earlier than what I saw on screen. Now this isn't to say that PC gamers have absolutely zero input latency. PCs still need to process the information that you're sending to them, and monitors still need to spit out and display the data. But PC players have much more control over their input latency because of the power of their systems, and features like disabling VSync and using a fast monitor will display a game faster than a PS4 that is connected to a super large widescreen 4K TV not using game mode, and even then, how much game mode really helps varies from model to model of TV. If you still don't believe much of what I've said thus far, because after all I'm just a meme content creator who doesn't play the game competitively, let me introduce to you Light Boogie.
Hey yo, my man Marco Yolo wanted me to come on and give my 2 cents on this topic, a very important topic that's raged on in our community since the game's been out. I've had the privilege to meet Marco twice now, IRL, once at PAX East 2018 and again at the Jormungandr reveal event. And the thing about Marco is he is just terrible at handshakes. I mean, god awful. So if any of you guys out there have the opportunity to meet Marco, just be prepared for that. Otherwise, he's a stand-up guy and a good friend of mine, and I'm honored that he asked me to come on here and kind of give my perspective. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Light Boogie. I am a streamer over on Twitch. I've been streaming For Honor on PS4 since the very last day of Season 1. And I've been playing on PS4 since the closed alpha, so I'm a console plebe through and through. I'm also the founder of For Honor Console, a tournament organization where we've kind of set out to give PS4 and Xbox players a platform to compete for prizes, and with the good broadcasts like commentating and all the bells and whistles of a good kind of tournament framework. So this topic is something I've been knee deep in since as long as I can remember. I've been in silly Reddit spats with PC players, defending console, and even some console players saying some wild shit like, 30 frames it means you're actually good at the game, 60 frames is easy. So there's a whole multitude of things to go over with this topic, but I'll try and keep things concise, because the fact of the matter is that PC is the best place to play the game, whether you play competitively or not, and that's for a multitude of reasons, unfortunately. And I'm going to kind of outline them here for you right now, because a lot of people would say, why can't console get 60 frames? 60 frames is what makes it easier for PC players to deal with certain attacks. So when we're talking about like balance issues, right? It's like, why isn't console balanced separately from PC? They have higher frames, so these fast attacks, because you guys have noticed that the game has been transitioning to faster attacks, more unreactable offense for quite a while now. I would say over the course of multiple seasons. And this has kind of spurned some of the discussion. And most recently, I think the thing that kind of encapsulates this issue is Raider's stunning tap that just recently got nerfed. The speed of it hasn't been nerfed, but just like the effectiveness of the attack has been nerfed quite a bit. So that's kind of like a snapshot of like the issue at hand. A lot of players are saying that with these fast attacks that they need more frames, and that it would make their lives a little bit easier, or maybe just balance the game separately for console. And we already know that's a slippery slope. I mean, there's been videos put out on it. I know Freeze has done it. The developers themselves have come out and said that they're just not going to do it. They want the game to be consistent, a consistent through line across all platforms. And the truth of the matter is that the issue is way deeper than just the frame rate, unfortunately. Even if I got 60 frames on my PS4 right now, there'd be inherent issues that would still hold me back from PC. And they can be kind of broken down into three topics. Number one is the inherent input lag on the hardware. So your DualShock 4 controller, your Xbox One controller, they all have inherent input lag that is unavoidable no matter what you do. And I'll give you an example of this, right? So DualShock 4 wireless mode has less input delay than DualShock 4 wired mode that Sony came out with, I believe like last year or something like that. And that's probably hard for you to believe, but it's true. It's been tested by people smarter than me. And the fucking people who make the console and the controller still can't solve the input issue. They made a wired mode that somehow makes the issue worse. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe Xbox One has a slightly higher input lag than DualShock 4 wireless mode. So these are issues you guys are dealing with just base level. Like, no, we're not talking frames, we're not talking anything, we're just talking inherent input lag. The second thing that kind of makes a difference is the field of view. Now, for those that don't know, PC has a field of view slider that allows you to pull the camera back a little farther back from your character. And what this does is it allows you to see more of the area around you, which, that's not going to make you an insanely good player. It's not going to solve some of the issues that we experience over on console, but being able to see more of your surroundings does make a pretty big difference. I mean, you can go look at a PC player who has the optimal settings and then come over to my stream, and how close the camera is to my character. It really impacts what you actually see, the visual feedback that you see. Like if I'm in a team fight, if I'm getting ganked, you know, what my surroundings are, where people are rotating to on the map, as far as I can see. So the field of view does really matter, and that's just one of the other things that PC has over console. And the third thing, and you know, this is just kind of like a sad reality of the situation, but for whatever reason, actually I do know the reason, but there's just a lot of McDonald's Wi-Fi warriors out here on these console streets, and you know, it's you know, a person by person basis. Obviously like me, I have a good setup. I have a wired internet connection. I have a monitor in which I play on, and a quick aside, I'll give you guys a quick free tip. All my console players out there who want 60 frames and to kind of help with the issues, get yourself a monitor that's 1080p, 1 ms response time, and 60 hertz or 75 hertz. Anything more than that hertz wise is just not going to do anything. It's a waste of money because you're using it for console. The console can't get anything more out of it. And that actually keeps the price down too. So playing on a big TV, even if it's on like game mode or whatever that is, there's still going to be quite a bit more input lag on that versus on a monitor. So you're still going to have the inherent input lag with your controller and just like the hardware itself, but just one little thing that you can help, and that tip is for free, my friends. But anyway, to get back to the point at hand, we're talking about those McDonald's Wi-Fi warriors, right? And just by nature, consoles are just an easier access point for people to play games. You buy a $400 box, you plug that shit in, you slide in your disc, and you're off to the races. You know, you might, you know, they might just, type in your Wi-Fi. Maybe you have enough room to set up your hardwire with your Ethernet. But you know, a lot of people don't take those things into account. They just want to play. Console has a lot more players, and as a result, there's just a large percentage of them who just don't give a shit about those little things that I was talking about, those really intricate things, because you know, not everybody wants to play competitive, you know, which is fine. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about these balance issues, right, we're talking about Raider and that stunning tap, and how that was kind of like a lightning rod for a lot of the balance discussions between the communities, and you know, console players saying it's, you know, a lot to deal with. The speed of the attacks don't change, right? If a Raider does a max delay stunning tap, it's the same speed it is on PC as it is on console. Yes, they can see maybe a little bit more of the attack because, you know, Raider is guilty of skipping some frames sometimes with his animations, but at the end of the day, the frames aren't going to be able to save us console plebes from those inherent issues that are baked in, and mainly the input lag. Like, if I had the choice between getting 60 frames versus getting the input lag solution fixed and maybe getting some field of view sliders, I think I would lean more towards the input lag fix, because I think that would be like an instant thing that you notice, as opposed to just having those 60 frames. Because yes, maybe you can see a little bit more of the attack animations, but are you still able to react to them easier? Probably not, because you're still going to have that input delay. The speed of the attacks just don't change. I mean, there's a whole genre of YouTube videos of PC players just like fucking bodying kids and making them super salty. PC players, there's a dime a dozen of scrub quotes on there. People type, like, PC players can actually type into the game chat and say all sorts of outlandish shit, and we see it all the time on streams and on YouTube videos. Them complaining about Raider, them complaining about Orochis and the way people are playing, and oh, why you spamming this, bro? Like, it's all, there's scrubs everywhere. We're all fucking bad at the game in our own way, across all platforms. So, you know, again, like, people, the point of this video, and I think what Marco's trying to get across, is the issue goes much deeper than just the frame rate. I know it's easy to latch onto it. It's a very easy concept to understand because everybody knows console's locked at 30, PC has 60 frames and can go even higher than that uncapped. But, you know, we gotta think a little bit more critically about this. And again, you know, the input lag and the field of view and some of these extra settings that PC has, even if we remove the frames out of it, PC would still have the advantage, and it'd be, you know, a more ideal place to play. So, you know, in closing, for all my console plebes out there, stay strong and just try and take these issues into account when you're trying to discuss some of the balance issues and some of the issues with the games. It's not all about those 60 frames, all right?
Thank you so much for helping out with this video, Boogie. If you guys want to check out his Twitch, which I strongly recommend you do, check out his link in the description below. So if you for some reason skipped to the end of the video or forgot everything I said throughout it all, let me give you a TLDW. Many For Honor console players claim 30 FPS is what is making it harder for them to react to attacks on console than the 60 plus FPS that PC players get. While higher frame rates increase the smoothness of animations, all animations' key points still occur at the same time periods, meaning the timings of attacks do not change. Regardless though, smoother animations do help identify incoming attacks. However, reacting to attacks isn't always a possibility, and you must predict or read your opponent because input latency adds a significant delay to consoles especially, and causes the game to feel faster since your reactions aren't received or shown as fast on screen. Especially with Ubisoft adding crossplay soon, players must realize what separates console player base from PC is not how many frames per second the game runs at. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And that wraps it all up. I can't wait to read the angry comments below, or posts about me elsewhere on the internet. Once again, Freeze and XDeadZX have great videos on the aforementioned topics, Light Boogie is an amazing Twitch streamer that you should check out, and there's a bunch of links to articles and other useful information all down in the description below. If you want more of this kind of content, let me know down below or elsewhere on the internet. I'm on the Twitter, I'm on the Instagram, and I've got a Discord. I'd of course like to thank my Patreon supporters as well, especially Kerfunklez, Jason J4YD33 Ypya, and Sean Chase. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the channel and get some cool behind the scenes benefits like a special role in my Discord. Have a fantastic day, guys. Let me know what you think about the 30 versus 60 FPS debate down in the comments below, and I will see you on the next video.